Hi, welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm Steve Richardson, a bankruptcy attorney trying to keep people on their path to financial stability and independence through education. One of the first steps on the path to financial freedom is getting your spending under control and creating a budget that has you living within your means. But determining why you overspend is an important part of the process if you want to stick to that budget. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talked with certified financial coach Scott Yamamura on the psychology behind overspending and how you can use it to identify your motivations and keep your spending under control. My guest today is Scott Yamamura, an expert in communication and design with over 25 years of experience. He became a certified financial coach in order to help individuals rethink their money by experiencing a financial epiphany. By breaking down the complexities of personal finance into simple, actionable items, he empowers people to take control of their financial future, achieve their goals, and ultimately find purpose in their journey of multiplying money. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks. Good to be here, Steve.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to talk to you about, as the title indicates, sort of the psychology of overspending, because that to a great extent comes down to mindset and achieving
Yeah.
financial freedom and managing your money effectively and spending within your means. That's what you need to do. If you're never going to you're never going to achieve financial freedom if you don't manage your money effectively and spend within your means. But is overspending just a bad habit people get into, or is there a psychological component to it?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the group of folks where it's not a bad habit and maybe they're very low income or in poverty. But what I want to speak to is those that have uh, options. And that's where this is an option to have a good habit or a bad habit. Maybe they're choosing this bad habit and it's layered upon some psychology, as you say.
Mhm.
So first the problem. 78%, it could be said, many studies will show folks are living paycheck to paycheck. 77% are in some form of debt. $100,000 is the average amount of debt. I mean, this is our culture here in America. And crisis, crisis, crisis. There's the housing crisis, the student loan crisis, the retirement crisis. We are normalizing crises. These are becoming everyday situations for the everyday person. We're accepting them because everybody's doing it.
Hmm.
And finances can be thought to be as a dry, uninteresting, intimidating thing full of fear, guilt, and regret. Depending on what culture you come from, what your parents taught you, it could be even looked at as a taboo thing, meaning you might be left to think about money all alone and figure it out all alone. In fact, when I grew up, my mom used to say, talking about money is like talking about your underwear. It's a private topic. And yes, we certainly don't want to be boasting about our bank accounts. But if we don't talk about money, and I appreciate you and I talking about it right now, and I hope a lot will be listening, is that now we're doing it in community. And when we do it in community and we share stories and we start to find out, oh, that's how money is. I thought it was like this, but it's actually like that under the hood. We can increase financial literacy. Another thing is that speaking of financial literacy, is that it is said that a majority of people aren't able to successfully answer 4 out of 5 basic financial literacy questions. So we as a nation are scoring low on financial literacy, and that leads to us going about it timidly. And so I want to change that around. That's the problem. So what is the solution? If we can say instead that instead of money being this sort of taboo thing that many folks think, well, accumulating it, that's got a native sound to it. Accumulating wealth, accumulating money, becoming rich. Well, what if we turned it into thinking about it as an ability, more like an athlete? And so I think of myself as a coach, and I think of people like an athlete that don't know about their ability to multiply money, and my job is to help point that out in them.
Mhm. Well, getting back to the psychology issue, you talk about all these statistics of, the average amount of debt is $100,000 or so, or about that, and such a high percentage of people uh, that are living paycheck to paycheck, that kind
Yeah,
of normalizes it to an
it
extent,
does.
say, where
Yep.
the people look around, and if anything, it might make them feel a little bit better. Well, I'm in a lot of debt. I've got $60,000 in debt, but hey, that's not too bad because the average is 100,000. Uh, or or I'm struggling paycheck to paycheck, but most people are. So I guess that's what I need to accept uh,
Hmm.
as my lot in life. And
Yep.
and that sort of psychology, I guess, is what you're talking about. It's not a bad
That's right.
habit. It's not saying, oh, you've got a bad habit to shake. It's that believing to some that it is not a bad habit at all, right? With that,
That's
would you say
right.
that's a pretty good
It's
explanation of
normal.
the psychology behind it?
Say again.
Would you say that's a fair assessment of the psychology behind
Yeah,
overspending?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's normalized. It's the bandwagon. If everybody's doing it, I'm comfortable being with everybody else. There's a study where there was a group of actors who were all going to answer something wrong. Now, someone was brought into that study. They had no idea the others were all teaming up together. And they were all asked the question, how long is this line? Can you match it to the length of this other line? And they all clearly answered it wrong. Well, the new person jumped right in and gave the wrong answer as well, even though it's painfully obvious what the right answer is. But they did it because everybody else did. And that's very similar to what's going on with finances. We look around and we say, okay, we're supposed to own these electronics. We're supposed to have this kind of car. We're supposed to be doing this many vacations to these kind of places. And so we go ahead and do it, even though we don't know what's hiding under the hood. Does this person have money in their bank account after all this? Or are they in the red because of this? So absolutely, that has a lot to do with thy psychology. And coming back around to if we describe multiplying money as an ability, I believe that's a big enough why to overcome any how because it's difficult to get out of debt and we need a really strong reason. So if we look at everybody as an athlete, if we look at everybody having an ability, that can help get us out of the ditch and get empowered and feel confident and get motivated about this thing we might not do anything about.
Mhm. But certainly, and you're right. We had to be motivated. We had to find a reason. There's an episode of my podcast a while back about finding your why,
Mm,
and doing that. But I guess the first step, that's what need to do to solve the problem, right?
yeah.
But in order to solve the problem, you got to realize there is one, and
Yes.
that's where the psychology we're talking about that. Where people are normalizing it because other people are in debt, other people are living paycheck to paycheck, but also to some extent, it's sort of a keeping up with the Joneses things, where you're everybody around you. Oh, I've got to have the latest iPhone. I've got to have this. My friends all do this, so I should be doing it too. And so that's a way of thinking that sort of ignores the problem and again normalizes it, right?
Mhm. You got it.
And also there's something, a psychological component here in what's often called retail therapy, right? Where
Yeah,
people
sure
are
thing.
addressing another problem through getting that dopamine hit of buying something, and then great, once you bought it, played with it a little bit, it's like a child. You got a great gift for Christmas, you played with it for a while, and then it sits over in a corner for the next 6 months. So it never really
Yeah.
solves that problem. And that's one
Mhm.
of the emotional triggers, right? That people go through is that they're feeling bad and they need that dopamine hit. So they engage in a little retail therapy.
Yeah, there's a saying I like to have in my back pocket, which is immediate gratification lasts a day, but financial wellness is gratifying every day.
Mhm.
And so if you're out there spending and you want to feel better right after you spent that money and it lasts a day, you're gonna have to keep spending the next day and the next day and more purchases and bigger purchases. But that's not sustainable.
Mhm.
That's going to empty your bank account. Now, If you take the other route, which is all right, it's going to take some self-control. We're going to try to multiply our funds and do a little bit of education here. We don't have to stop learning just because we graduated high school or college. We should continue learning thereafter. And in fact, if we're going to work 40 years to fund a 30-year retirement, then we owe it to ourselves to add some financial education here. But yeah, certainly if we multiply that money so that there's something we're going to be able to pull out of in retirement and building our nest egg, that brings gratification every day. That brings peace, financial peace, and we want to have that for everybody because right now we're in financial distress. But like you're saying, we may not even be aware of it.
Hmm. Well, it's again going back to mindset and transitioning from um, immediate gratification to delayed gratification, and
Right.
knowing, okay, I'm not going to have it now, but once I do, it's going to be so much better. And it's
Right.
flipping the switch from
Mhm.
short to long term gratification that's part of the solution, right?
It is, and some of my teaching is recognizing even that is hard because
Hmm.
delayed gratification. A certain amount of people, they're right there. They hear, do the right thing. It's going to happen later. I'll get that reward later, and they'll go ahead and do that. But that's hard for most of us to hear. And so, what we'll talk about later is how another way of how I flip that. It has everything to do with the ability to multiply money again. But we need another bigger reason, I believe, in order to convince us to take action because it is so hard to be later minded, especially if you're just starting your career. And later minded
Hmm.
means 40 years from now. 40
Yeah.
years from now, I'm gonna retire. That is so off into the future. It's off the map. We're not even really most of us thinking about that at the time. We need a bigger why.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now, we talked about retail therapy, but what are some of the other emotional triggers and mental barriers that lead to impulsive financial decisions?
Sure. Well, I always say that if we don't have a financial plan, then the world's plan is going to happen to us. And by that, I name the five financial C's of debt, financial debt. And that would be card, stands for credit card. You're going to get them in the mail starting at age 18. If you're not ready for it, you might sign up for one. You get a t-shirt in exchange, sure, but you might be paying debt for the rest of your life. The average amount of revolving debt month to month is about $6,000. Um, and then another C, financial C, is college.
Okay.
So around age 18, we're going into college. 60% of students are taking out a college loan. Average amount is about $40,000. So when we get out of college, when we have our most potent multiplying time with our money, we're actually using it to pay off debt. What if we chose to go to a college we could afford or worked so that we could work off tuition as we go? Another financial C of debt is car loans, and it's very common to be tens of thousands of dollars in debt for a car. How about buying used up front? Another financial C, I call it cake, wedding cake, or even any sort of experience like traveling, concerts, things like that. We tend to splurge on these experiences um, and go into debt on them. And lastly, the last financial C is condo. And many of us opt to be house poor, buying more house than we can afford. And so we really need to look at these debts. I call them the path of snares and traps. We're
Mhm.
going to walk that path unless we have a plan. All of these are we're very likely to overspend on
Mhm.
if we don't have a bigger why. And we might even um, call debt a different name, financing, or the payment plan, something with a more positive spin. Oh, I got points. Oh, it was on sale. It was discounted. And we might be justifying these purchases. I call it you're snuggling with your struggle. Do you snuggle with your struggle? We keep it close. We say, hey, this is why I was able to go do this. I want to protect this decision of mine. But doing that over and over and over again can lead to financial distress.
Mhm.
And you do mention, triggers and barriers. Um, to financial decisions. And I believe that keeping up with the Joneses. You mentioned that one. So, what is everybody else doing? I need to compare myself to others. So where's my status? There's analysis paralysis is another thing. There's so many financial options and messages out there. Who do we believe? What's the action we need to take? We tend to freeze because there's so many options, and we don't have a simple way of saying, okay, just go this one way, and then you can learn about finances later, but get started. We don't feel very confident in that. And then there's lifestyle inflation, where typically many of us can expect some sort of raise over time with the job we're working, but we tend to increase our spending when we get a raise, and it just disappears. We always say to ourselves, oh, I'll save later when I make more money. But when actually later comes, we tend to be spending it.
Mhm. Lifestyle creep is what I've heard it called, but yes, where
Yeah.
your income increases over time and you then increase your spending in lockstep with it rather than staying at your current uh, cost of living and using the difference for long-term savings. But I want
Right.
to talk to you about one of the C's, and we talked about immediate gratification and keeping up with the Joneses, and but
Mm.
where people I don't think people really see that is in the second C, college,
Mm.
in which
Yes.
and I say to people, just because you got into NYU, and nothing against NYU, just very
Mm.
expensive,
Mm.
okay? Uh, just because you got into NYU doesn't mean you can afford to go there. And you need to
Right.
look at that and say, okay, your fellow high school seniors may be very impressed that you got into NYU or Stanford or wherever it is. Although some of these schools have a lot of good financial aid packages and incentives,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you can't afford it, now once you graduate high school, who cares what your classmates think? You're they're in school, and again, that's that immediate gratification of getting into your dream school and having the
Right.
wonderful college experience, and you're so tied up in the emotion of that and the dopamine hit that you don't realize how much you're spending beyond your means.
Yeah, and to a lot of us, going after that credential of a great school, we care about that in the moment. But later on in retirement, if our retirement is suffering because we went to that school later, maybe it wasn't so smart after all. We need to be thinking about the whole picture,
Mm-hmm.
and really what is important to have a healthy and happy life is what most of us are looking for. And if college or any of these other things, cake, condo, car, card, if any of these things are robbing us of that outcome, was it really worth it in the beginning? And many times we just need to think about what we're doing up front, because debts can live with us a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, going on to other stressors, I mean, as we're recording this in February, we're in tax season.
Hmm.
And does that have any effect on people and on their spending decisions as we approach April 15th?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, two-thirds of Americans can expect a tax refund. The average amount is about $3,000. So, to some of us, that feels like a windfall. Okay, $3,000. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Um, and many of us will plan on doing a good thing with it, saving, paying off debt, things of that nature. But also, another set of us, we're ready to spend. It's going to pay for a vacation. It's going to pay for new possessions. An update, to the house or this or that, maybe optional things. And so it's been called that receiving a tax refund is actually been giving the government an interest-free loan all year, right? Now,
Absolutely.
that's dependent on the withholding. When we say out of our paycheck, okay, government, you can take this much, we're allowing the government to take more than they need just so they can give it back to us later. But what I teach about is investing. And investing is actually taking as much money as you can up front, not giving it to the government first, and using that to multiply.
Mhm.
And so, two options here I might recommend. If you do get a $3,000 windfall at tax time, how much of that can you invest? I teach simple math that if you're 22 and you're just starting your first job and you have $3,000 out of your tax refund, and you invested all of that, by the time you retire, it multiplies by 16. That's the number to remember. We'll talk about that later. But 16, that means if you invest $3,000 that one year, it'll be $48,000 when you retire. It multiplies by 16. Now, another way to use a tax refund, or actually look at the tax refund, is to say, what if your withholding was accurate so that you got no refund in the end? That means you got $3,000 more throughout the year. And what if you invested that money as soon as you got it? That also over a lifetime can turn into tens of thousands of dollars or more just because you got it early and started investing that. And so both these ways are looking from an investment lens at taxes and looking specifically at those big refunds that most of us actually allow for in our paychecks.
Hmm. And the second option, and I was going to mention that, but you beat me to it. Uh, I tell people, and I tell my bankruptcy clients, because one of the questions I ask, especially this time of year, is, are you anticipating a tax refund? Because that's considered an asset, and we don't want the trustee to take it. And
Wow.
if it's a fairly big number, I'll say, do you usually get a tax refund every year? And the answer is often yes. I'm like, well, now's the time maybe to file a new W-4 with your employer. Talk to a tax professional on how you should change that W-4, how you should adjust it so you don't end up owing too much money. But if you can adjust it
Right.
where you're within that sweet spot of maybe you get a little bit back or you owe a little bit, where
Hmm.
you can get that money, wouldn't you rather have it in your pocket every paycheck rather than once
Hmm.
a year? And if you can discipline yourself to take that additional money and invest it long term, now your dollar cost averaging over time. So
Right.
it may be the same $3,000, but if you take that $3,000 tax refund and put it in the market all at once, you're investing in a particular price point or purchase
Yeah.
that
And who
stock.
knows if that's a good time?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And then and maybe everybody, a lot of other people are doing the same thing, which could affect price. But if you're doing that little by little, every paycheck, you're putting it aside,
Yes.
or maybe heck, sometimes you can tell your employer to uh, put some of the money into a savings account, direct deposit, and the rest into checking, and then it's out of sight, out of mind in your savings account, and then you just invest it from there into a mutual fund or something like that, and you can really. And I'm not a financial advisor, but seems to me you can probably get that money to grow even more because of regular investment over time and dollar cost averaging, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here is optimize our situation. And when we're giving the government the interest-free loan so they've got our money, we want our money to work for us, right? That's a common sentiment. And it's not working for us if it's sitting there with the government.
Mm-hmm.
We can grow it in the meantime. And so optimizing our finances is what we want to look at. So when it comes to taxes, absolutely, that's one way of doing it is getting our withholding close to zero, zero refund at the end of the year, or actually investing as much of that refund as we can.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about solutions. Now that we've identified all of these things that hopefully will have alerted our audience to what's going on and recognize that maybe they have some issues to address and just change their thinking. And nobody should feel guilty about any of this. It's
No.
something that happens, and it's something, unfortunately, that most of the country does. So
Right.
believe me, the listeners shouldn't feel bad about any of this. They're in the same boat with the vast
Yeah.
majority of Americans. But
We're
where
all in
they
this
can,
together.
right, but if they take action and change their situation by recognizing they have this issue and doing something about it, they're then going to put themselves in a much better position than the vast majority of Americans. So you
Yep.
talked about
Optimized.
getting motivated.
Mm.
So why don't we jump? We were talking about building that muscle and being that athlete
Yeah.
and overcoming these problems and creating a smarter plan. But how do
Yeah.
you get people motivated to get past these pitfalls?
Great question. Okay. Now, the world will commonly give us advice that we don't take action on, or maybe we do. Once again, a certain amount of us will hear something financial and just go do it, but many of us don't. So we might hear save early. Well, okay, sounds like good advice. We may trust who's telling it to us. We may believe it, but it doesn't cause us to go do it. We may hear other things. Save 15% of your income. By the time you retire, have 10 times your salary saved up. Uh, Utilize compound interest. It's the eighth wonder of the world. There's even that. That's attributed to Einstein, even. It sounds like the most intelligent thing to do, yet we still don't do it. Make your money work for you. And then the other really convincing thing, I believe, is um, retirees' largest regret. One of them is I wish I could go back and save more earlier. And so, boy, if we don't listen to retirees and what they're saying from their perspective, I don't know who we're going to believe. So we're hearing all these save early messages one way or another, but we're still where we're at as a nation, mostly in an unhealthy financial situation. And so you talk about the athlete. So how do we come up with a set of understandings? I call them three financial epiphanies. How do we come up with these understandings that are simple enough for most of us to get? The most of us that aren't getting it right now. Well, we have to create a simple framework. So there's three things that I like to make money freeze with. So it stops running circles around us. It feels like it's a constantly moving target, roving variable. So we can't nail it down. So we just get that analysis paralysis and put it off and ignore it. Well, those three things are what is the most common time we start a career? Well, 22. Could be 21, could be 23. But if we say it's 22, then we're making money freeze. And then another thing, what's the length of the average career? 40 years. Could be 39, could be 41. But when we choose 40, that's we're making money freeze by choosing a single number. And how about a rate of return? That's the third part of the simple framework. Well, I like to use 7.2% because it's a common rate of return for the market and stocks and bonds and things like that over the long run. But it also leads to the most simple math. And when we do make money freeze by stating those three pieces of the simple framework, starting a career at age 22, working for 40 years, and earning a 7.2% rate of return on our investments, we now can lead to the three financial epiphanies. And I'll mention the first one right now. Financial epiphany number one is that invested money, can double every 10 years. So when you put in $1,000 and it's earning that 7.2% interest rate, 10 years later, it'll be 2,000. It will have doubled. That is the simplest way to think about investing is that if I'm working a normal career and my money is earning a normal amount, generally when I put in this amount of money, 10 years later, it'll have doubled. And I love thinking in those terms because it is so simple. It's breaking things down so simply that we no longer need a calculator to depend on. We no longer need a financial advisor. And most people are scared of meeting with a financial advisor. They might think of them as scarier than going to the dentist. And so we want to make money friendly and empower people so that they figure money out and understand it. Then they go to the financial advisor and say, "Hey, what do you think? This is what I understand is going on." And then that financial advisor can say, "Whoa, all right, your understanding looks pretty good." Um, that's a lot friendlier way to go about things. So financial epiphany number one is that a single investment of money can double every 10 years. Very simple.
So how does the motivation come in? We've talked about the motivation and getting out of this thought pattern and
Yeah.
maybe some of the negative thoughts that, I just started work, I'm barely paying the bills, I have all these student loans, I don't
Yeah.
have the money to
Right.
invest. And then
Yeah.
that holds them back from
Hmm.
investing early and investing in their 20s.
Yeah.
How would you motivate someone that has that mindset?
Yeah, and I think that is the big question, and I love thinking around this and coming up with an answer for folks because it's our most potent money multiplying time because we typically have a career and we have that ability to invest and we have the most years for that money to multiply. And so, financial epiphany number two, I call it the power of 16. So think about it this way: if money can double every 10 years, and we work 40 years, 1,000 can double into 2,000 when we're 32. And then by the time we're 42, 2,000 doubles into 4,000, 4,000 doubles into 8,000 in our 50s. And by the time we retire, it's 16,000. It's doubling 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000. So when we flip that, when we say, well, okay, $1,000 investing now at age 22 is $16,000 later, when we flip that, it turns into an ability we have.
Mhm.
Oh, I have the power of 16 now. I have this ability. I'm like an athlete that needs to act now during this small window of time, and my ability diminishes, it halves over time. I have the power of 16 now. 10 years later, it's going to be the power of 8. It's going to go from 16 to 8, and then it's going to go from 8 to 4. When we realize that the diminishing effect of our money multiplying power is just like athleticism, it's just like getting old, our eyesight is gonna go, our bones will creak, things like that. If we look at money like that, and that is how multiplying money is, now we're getting the sense of urgency. Now we're understanding I need to act now. Okay, I'm not going to be able to be the high school quarterback forever. I need to go out there and train now. I need to make sacrifices now. And the
Mhm.
same thing is with money, is that how do you save when you don't have any money to save? Well, you increase your income and you decrease your expenses, and you'll be willing to make those sacrifices when you realize I've got the power of 16 now. I'm just starting my career, and it's going to be the power of 8 in 10 years. I need to act now. And so that's why I love this whole parallel thinking about saving and investing money as being an athlete, because the common myth is I don't need to think about money right now. I need to think about my college and my car and, finding a spouse and getting married and getting a house one day and my wedding. We think about all these things. To add one more thing in, wow, we commonly think when I make more money, I'll figure this out. When I get promoted, I'll wait till then. Well, what I'm telling everybody here is it's actually the opposite. You're not better at multiplying money later in life. Your best multiplying time, your most potent multiplying time is when you have the power of 16 right when you start your career. And if we tell people that, they can make room for investing when it's doing the most good.
Mhm. And maybe also giving motivation by replacing one emotional goal or feeling with it with another one that is longer term. In other words, well, I want my children to have better than I don't want. I want them to have a better life, better education. I don't want them to go through life with student debt like I did. Well, if I want to make that happen, then I need to pay down my debt. I need to be investing in their education. If I someday want a home, then I need to save for a down payment, and I need to pay down my debt so I get a better credit score. A great example of this, and substituting and thinking in other terms, is I had a guest on the show that she and her husband live in an old house, and they wanted to replace the windows in their home. Well, because the home was so old, the windows had to be all custom. They didn't have standard like we know now. When they build a house, there's standard size windows that you put in. So they were expensive. So every time they had an opportunity to do one thing, is spend the money on this, they'll say, that's half a window. You
Hmm.
know, that's
Yes.
that's a window and a half. I can get another window with that money. And
Hmm.
you replace one thing with another, keep thinking in that long-term
Yes.
goal,
Yep.
and that can help motivate you out of some of the um, more detrimental mindsets, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to make it tangible because when we think about 40 years from now, 20 years from now, whenever it is we're going to retire, it's
Mm-hmm.
too far off in the distance to know
Mm-hmm.
what is the impact I'm doing now going to have then. And that's why I teach in terms of multiplying power. If I tell somebody you've got the power of 16, and when you're in your 50s, you're going to have the power of 2. Don't you want to act right now? Don't you want to be the star athlete while you have the chance? You don't want to miss this. You don't want to pass this up. In fact, there's one saying by a writer, G.K. Chesterton, and he says, if there ever was a train I wanted to catch, I was only able to catch it because I missed the one before. And what I want to tell people by saying that is, if you feel in some time in life that you haven't started investing, well, get started soon. And it's a common human sentiment to have missed the train before. Okay, I got into college debt. Okay, I'm not ready to save now. Well, we're more likely to get out of that if we know there's a train to catch. And it doesn't have to be someone else's train. It needs to be our train. Maybe I need to my train to catch is to start investing at age 25. Or maybe it's even later than that. But let's do it early because that multiplying power diminishes. It's called uh, exponential decay. Now, I know that probably is not a fun term for anybody to hear, but if you hear that your multiplying power has an exponential decay, it actually reduces by half every 10 years, you are way more likely to use your superpower when its strongest.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, we've been talking about financial epiphanies,
Hmm.
but I understand that you've recently come out with a book about
Hmm.
financial epiphanies, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned a couple of them, but
Yeah.
there are more epiphanies in that book. Tell us a little bit about this book and some of the other things it can teach people if they want to read it.
Right. Yeah, the idea is to take anybody who just does not understand finances and it is to make it in the most simple and creative way understandable. Here, I'll just pick up a copy of it right here. You can see what it looks like.
Right.
Financial Epiphany. And the subtitle is Discover Your Ability to Multiply Money and Reimagine Your Financial Life. And really, most of us don't understand how to multiply money. And so we've broken it down into the simple framework, which I explained, starting a career at age 22, working for 40 years, earning a 7.2% rate of return. And if we do those things, we can understand and build upon it the three financial epiphanies. And those epiphanies, which is that invested money can double every 10 years, and that we have the power of 16 when we start our careers. And thirdly, that our multiplying power halves every 10 years. If we understand those things, that's all we need to know to take action. It gives us the confidence. And so, if you didn't in if you didn't ingest all of that and you're wanting to know more, reading the book gives you all the examples and it gives you all the applications. Looking at, oh, well, how old are you? Well, here's how you can apply these three rules of thumb at this age, and here's how you can apply these three rules of thumb at that age. I also have some more aggressive sorts of moves to do regarding saving for your children's college or saving in a custodial account or even creating a fund that I call a forever fund that generates money forever. That's why I call it the forever fund. And it really is how to create an endowment, which is more common for a college, university, or a hospital to fund their organization. But why not, if it's working for them, why not create one for ourselves or for our business? So the book goes into applying these three financial epiphanies across a whole spectrum of options in life, but it does so in such a simple and creative way that it gives people confidence and the motivation to take action. I saw people all around me. We're silently suffering with our finances, and I want to help as many people get healthy and feel confident so that we can reach the last chapter, which I call From Products and Prices to People and Purpose. And by that, I mean, when we're out there buying something, a product, we're looking for a deal, we're looking for a sale, we're looking for a discount. We might haggle over it. But when it comes to people and purpose, there's no price tag. There's no value on a person. They're of infinite value. And what if we multiplied money so that there was more left over, so it wasn't all lost to debt? What if we had money that we could invest in others? Maybe it's through a nonprofit organization. Maybe it's a family member in need or a neighbor and friend in need. What if we had the ability and we used our multiplying power to multiply finances so that there is some to invest into our life's purpose? Maybe that's the very reason why we're on this earth is to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to take care of ourselves and our own family, certainly, but to also reach beyond that. And finances is just one way we can do that. There's also our time, talents, and other ways we can apply it. But what if we got good at our finances?
Mhm. Well, I will leave a link down in the show notes for anybody who's interested in getting your book and learning more about these financial epiphanies. and maybe some of the psychological traps that they're in that are holding them back. But I appreciate you coming on to the show, Scott, and giving us all this great information about how to rethink our money and rethink long-term financial goals.
Thanks, Steve, for having me on. It's been great speaking with you.
Absolutely.